I'm preparing to make my second seat cover for the W4 2.0, and I've had a lot of questions asked about how I created the patterns, so I thought I'd let you see how I created them as I get ready to assemble my next one. So first I took one of the seats out of the wagon, and I haven't stripped it down yet. That'll come next. And I put my fabric on a board and made sure my pattern was facing the way I wanted it to face on the seat. I have a layer of cotton print and then a layer of quilted cotton, and that's all I'm going to use for my fluff factor. If you'd like to put a layer of cotton batting in, you could as well. I just don't think my kids need to be that comfortable. I grew up without air conditioning. They can manage with this much cush on their bottoms. So I'm going to, before I cut this out, obviously, I laid the seat down with the seat part down on the bottom of my fabric, leaving about an inch at the bottom. And then I traced around the seat, pulling in the sides, and then rocked it down towards the top as I traced around it. And I made sure to leave about a ½ inch to an inch, and this was kind of eyeballing it, of seam allowance up the sides. And I left just a little bit more at the top and bottom because I wanted to be able to have that wiggle room to like pull it under and pull it over at the top. So in order to trace around the seat, I used a heat pen. You can look on Amazon for a sewing heat sensitive pen. And when you use a heat pen, let's see where mine is, there's the cap to it. When you use a heat pen, you can mark on your fabric. You'll see marks on mine here. You can mark on your fabric, but when you touch it with an iron, the ink disappears completely right away. So you can make as many marks on it as you need to, and then just iron your cover when you're all done, and all of the marks disappear. So that's what I use when I get to the buttonholes and all those other parts. So this is the bottom of the seat and the back of the seat, and you'll notice I made sure that to turn my pattern or my fabric so that my pattern was the way I wanted it when it's sewn on the seat. The next piece that I created was the side. Now I'll admit, when I first did this for the first seat, I did this in two pieces. So I had a triangle for the recline part, and then I had this for the seat part. And now I don't think that I need to make that extra stitch line, so I'm just making it all in one piece. So to create this, I'll turn this over here. To create this piece, I again layered my fabric, and you'll see one of my marks across. It won't be there once I iron. I laid my fabric on top of my quilting again for my front and back. You'll see a left and right side here. And how I created this was I took the seat and I laid it on the fabric. This one's a little bit trickier because you've got to do other things. So I'm using the wrong side. Here we go. You've got to do a couple extra steps for this one. So I laid it down, and I made sure that at the bottom of my fabric, now this is extra, so you kind of ignore this place where the bar goes in. I made about a ½ inch seam allowance at the bottom, and then I took my pen and I marked the angle of the seat in the back. Then I came around here and I marked the front. I lined it up here, marked around the curve in the front, and I went straight across with my pen, and that's the line you see right here. But I wanted my fabric to flap over like those other seat covers do. So I decided I wanted it to go over, and you'll see these are bigger than the seats because you've got seam allowance. I wanted it to go over about 4 inches. So I made my line, see, I made my line here, and then I just took a ruler and I went up at about 4 inches on each side, and then I met them at the top, and when I was cutting, I just curved those pieces a little bit. And now once I had one side done in the way I wanted it, I just took it and put it on top of another set of fabric layers and cut around it. So now I've got two matching, one left and one right. So those are your sides. Now if you want to add pockets on each side, you're going to need a piece that will sit on top. And how I chose to do mine was I took a layer of cotton fabric in my print, and you'll see this is a long rectangle. I folded it over so that the top didn't need to be stitched, and it was double layered and it's folded. And then I just looked at the part of the side that would hold the pocket. So I know that it's not going to come where the recline part is, so I just went straight up there. I know that this is the top of the seat before the fold over, so I didn't want it to come up this high, and I knew this was my edge. So I put the folded part up here and I just made a rectangle. Now when I sew the sides, I'm going to sew this side into the seam before I turn it inside out and flip it. And this one, I'm just going to do like a zigzag stitch on the top. So I made 2 of these pieces. Now I also like to sew in toy leashes so that I don't have that extra piece hanging around. So I just took a scrap once I'm completely done and know I've got enough fabric. I just took a scrap and I made this one. I think my other ones were 22 inches long. This one's about 20 inches long. And it didn't matter which way the fabric was oriented because I'm just going to make a narrow little strip when it's done. I made a rectangle. This one's about 3 inches high. And I'm going to fold it, stitch it, turn it. Once it's turned, I'm going to come over here, and inside my pocket, I'm going to stitch the toy leash using a little box over here. And then on the other end of my toy leash, I'm going to use a snap set, and I'm going to put a snap in there that'll hold a loop, and then I can snap toys and things to it, and it'll already be in the pocket. I can keep it in the pocket when I'm not using it, and I can pull it out and snap something to it if I need to. So those are the side pieces. Now, the next piece is going to be the tricky part. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways that I approached it. And I haven't cut this one out ahead of time for you because I wanted to be able to show you my origami trickery that I do. So I lay the seat down on the fabric I want to be the back flap. And what I'm talking about is the part that when you are done with your seat cover, it's going to be right here. So it's going to be right over the back. Now, if you don't want a pocket, or if you don't want a zipper in here, if you just want a flap that slides over the seat, you can make a shape like this. And then you can kind of still reach up and under to access your zippers if you want to. But this would be the easiest way to do it. And in order to do that, what I did was I laid the seat down. In fact, you can do it this way to make it easier. I laid the seat on the quilted fabric. That's what I use for my back flaps. And I noticed that this bar here is where I want my back part of it to be. I don't want it to go any further than that because of this buckle. So this is as far as I want it to go. So I marked my fabric here, and then I traced around with a seam allowance the shape of it. And this is what I ended up with. So that would have been the back if I didn't want a pocket. In order to sew this, you would just hem this down here, and then you would sew this into the seat. But I like making my life complicated, and I had some extra zippers laying around. So what I decided to do was put in a pocket, and this is the easiest way I've found to do it. And you kind of have to follow along because it looks a little more complicated than it is. So